Welcome to the Liberty Bell. We are exploring the moral foundations of freedom, and we are seeking what's right with all of our heart, soul, and might. I'm James.
And I'm Joshua, and thank you for joining us again this week. We want to have some interesting topics on our 6th episode, and we are excited to get into these topics and things that we've seen. Unfortunately, these things are going on, but it gives us something to talk about, James.
There's no lack of things to talk about in the world right now, for sure. This week we had, I don't even know where to start. We had Nick Cannon sounding off about white people being less than. And he was fired.
The Fourth Reich was started this week.
Right. He was fired for anti-Semitism.
Right.
Not for anything he said about white people in general. That's totally fine. But
and there's probably a white person that fired him.
Probably so.
Like, we don't care what you say about us. We just care about what you say about the Jews.
Right. And then, speaking of white people and whiteness, the National Museum of African American Culture and History, or History and Culture, put
There's
out this,
a lot of letters.
Yeah, the NMAACH. They put out this brilliant pamphlet that I actually really love.
No, it's great.
I love it, about whiteness and white culture. And I can't tell if it's meant. I think it was supposed to be critical, but it came out really, really in high praise of white people.
Yeah, I want to shake these people's hands. Thank you.
I love it. Gosh, what else happened this week?
Let me see. The Texas Rangers are supposed to change their name.
Right, because
I'm not sure.
Redskins.
Yeah, the Redskins changed their name.
Yeah.
My Braves are hanging on.
Yeah,
they are.
We'll see.
They're hanging on, but it won't be too long. I mean, they're so bad at baseball in the long game. Like, once you get down to playoff time, that's where they cave. So they'll stay strong, and then it's like once we get to the big stuff, they'll cave.
And then also we've got mask madness. We've got mask things developing everywhere. So we had Governor Kemp in Georgia, God bless him, struck down all local mask requirements, which I thought was great.
Yeah,
which I was not expecting. And in fact, he had to sue the mayor of Atlanta
to make that happen. That's a shame.
To make it happen, yeah.
I don't think we'll be able to count on Uncle Roy to do that here in North Carolina.
Definitely not.
We can probably count on having a different governor.
But it does seem to be that the mask thing is becoming like a political issue.
Oh, it's huge.
It's becoming a political
it's
symbol, whether or not you wear the mask.
Yeah.
And people are like fighting in public. And so we can talk about that.
Okay. I want to talk about Ed Ogeron and his statement that he made this week. I don't know if you read the article.
Okay, lay that out for me, because I'm not a sports guy.
Let's start. Yeah. So, all right, Ed Ogeron is the football coach for the LSU Tigers. They beat Clemson last year in the national championship. So I'm not saying this just because I'm a little bitter at him.
Okay.
But he goes out and he says, I'm trying to get the link. Okay, here we go. He says to Mike Pence, he reaches out. He's worried about the season actually happening and taking place. And so he says to Mike Pence that football is the lifeblood of America. And let me see. And so it just really frustrated me because it's as much as I love football.
Yeah.
There were times in my life where I put football before anything else, and I paid dearly for it. My football career ended abruptly at that point in time, and I believe that because of where I placed it in my life, that it was taken from me. And so that's what I believe he's doing, is he's putting football before America.
Okay.
With all of these things going on, all the things happening in our nation's literally burning down. A influential leader, a national championship winning coach, goes out and he says, he of course thinks we're going to have football. I think we probably will too. But he says the country needs it. Louisiana needs it. I agree with that. And especially in the Southeast where we're at. I mean, sports, they bring a lot of money to our communities and our areas. But to say that football is the lifeblood of our nation is so ignorant, because we need people that stand up and say, I'm to keep America together. I'm willing to set making money aside. I'm willing to, and I'm not saying that he's a bad guy. I'm just saying that what you hear right now, especially from these sports groups, different sports, NASCAR, NFL, college football, that rely on that money to keep them floating. Their focus is more on whether or not they're going to get to play.
Yeah.
While people are out killing each other, ridiculous things are happening. Ridiculous rules are being placed on people, and he is directly influencing 100-some guys to focus on, regardless if the world is going to hell in a handbasket, we still need to play football.
This speaks so much to what you talk about all the time about churches focused more on, expanding their buildings and the economic side than actually on what's important, what's really important, and what's true.
No, exactly. And so football is not the lifeblood of our country. It's Jesus Christ. I mean, it's the Lord that has allowed us to have this opportunity. It's the freedom and liberty we have. It's our police officers and our first responders and regular people that go to work each day and pick this stuff up. And so what it does is it's continuing to fuel to this fire of like, well, you're special because you can play sports. You're special because you can do this. You might be special in that one area, but when what this radical group of Marxist communists are pushing for in our nation, when that takes control, that takes place, football won't exist. Baseball won't exist. And then, I mean, there won't be any room for it to exist.
Nobody will have the money to buy the tickets either.
No, exactly.
Well, that speaks to a big problem, which is really, to me, that's symptomatic of the whole thing we're seeing right now, which is that we've lost any kind of like center of everybody being on the same page about what America is about. Like if you went out in the street and you asked people, what's the lifeblood of America? You're not going to get a consistent answer.
Right.
You're not going to get a consistent vision of what America is about. And because we have that fragmentation and we've been living in it for a while, people are picking and choosing this thing or that thing or football or money or this thing or that thing. And none of us are on the same page. And because we have that weakness in our culture, it makes us very susceptible to chaos and also makes us very susceptible to outside attack. And it's just, it's kind of just the nature of the time we're living in, but it's very dangerous.
Yeah. Well, to think that, and here's this, a lot of Americans would disagree with me. I think it's because of the Lord that has allowed an opportunity for us to have what we have. So that to me is the lifeblood of our nation, because the principles, while liberty and freedom were key, the freedom to worship was the central focus for most colonists, most people that moved here, most leaders, early days of our nation. The freedom not to be told by a organized specific group how each person is individually supposed to worship.
Right.
And so as we may disagree, some people may say, well, liberty is our lifeblood, or freedom's our lifeblood, or Jesus is our lifeblood, or capitalism's our lifeblood. To go and he may have not meant it the way I took it, but now is not the time to go and say football. Without football, our nation will fall.
Well, it
essentially
speaks to a focus on the material.
Well, exactly.
Because, from a certain perspective, he's not wrong. Economically, football is one of the lifebloods of our nation. But it's like the economics are not the foundation, or they're not supposed to be. But at some point in the last 100 years, we traded that. We traded a moral and religious foundation for an economic foundation.
Right.
So because America became so prosperous and making money and moving money and creating money, that became so easy and it became so abundant that people became focused on money as the lifeblood of America.
Yeah.
And in some ways, Trump represents that, and that, in some ways, like that's a problem with the current state of the conservative movement. Mm-hmm. But we've got to return to that. What do you think? Do you think it's possible that America as a whole is going to voluntarily go back to some kind of moral and spiritual foundation, or is it going to take just really hard times coming?
Well, so that's what you talked about, how people, it's hard to find a time where they disagree or where they agree on everything. And so, but you go back through our history, and what we've seen is typically you'd have two factions in our history. You'd have, I mean, especially starting, you take the Civil War, you had two factions of people, and that was pretty much it. It was pretty much a fine line between North and South.
Yeah.
And then you go to the Vietnam era, you had a very clear two-faction group. You had anti-war, and then you not necessarily pro-war, but my son's over there.
Right.
So, I'm going to support, or I fought, World War II, and my kid's over there, and or I fought in the military, and I'm going to support our military no matter what.
Right.
And you go George Bush days, you had very much two factions. You had a more very much aggressive approach towards fixing that situation, and then with the war on terror, and then you had the very much, we're wasting our time. What we've seen is we're in a time where the two factions have split up into 20 factions. So there's 10 factions on each side, and you can't get one clear group together because everybody disagrees so much. But you find World War II generation, there was one faction in our nation. 9/11, there was one faction. And it does take, so morally, spiritually, I think to get as many people as there are in our nation on the same page, it would take, it's going to take something bad happening.
It takes a crisis to rally people around a common vision is what you're saying.
But World War II, everybody was together, and then they were together for about 20 years, and then you started seeing that shift away. 9/11, they were together about 2 months, and then you started seeing the shift away. True. So it's getting harder and harder for those crises to take hold. Also, we have the media that keeps people divided. The media is the greatest divisive thing out there.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I don't see us. The only what I see is rather than us coming together and coming together as one group, I see us dividing in two clear groups, and it being full on, hand to hand, face to face, toe to toe between those two groups.
I've been seeing that sentiment expressed on social media this last week. People are starting to talk that way.
Yeah,
and people are very, clear about. They're like, I'm not saying I want this to happen.
Right.
I'm afraid for this to happen. Mm-hmm. I don't want this to happen, but it looks more and more inevitable every day.
Well, and I think that a lot of conservatives they pretty much just count on, well, America's been here for 250 years, so I'm just going to kind of let it play out. It'll be fine. I've seen ignorant people before.
Yeah.
This group's so much more dangerous than that because they're actually making change. They're actually changing things. And if people don't realize that they are actually succeeding at changing things, and people may argue with that, but look at how many monuments have been torn down. Yeah. Look at how many people have assaulted police officers, killed innocent people and got away with it. And then you have this lady in front of Trump Tower that, defaces the Black Lives Matter mural, and she gets arrested immediately.
Oh yeah.
I'm
sure that's a federal felony at this point.
Yeah. And so it's crazy. I'm looking through some more of the stuff we've
I was just going to say something about that. I mean, what I don't remember what I was going to say. I just wonder if we see, like you're saying, we're split into all these different factions. It looks a lot more like early World War I than it looks like World War II, where there's kind of two clear big camps. It's much more like these little fragmented factions. And I don't see, it doesn't look like it's like conservatives versus liberals, because the left is all divided. You've got radical people, and they're fighting with the people who are trying to stay moderate.
But the moderates are dying out.
And they're dying out, and they're kind of getting eaten by the radicals.
Yeah.
But then in the conservatives, you see all kind of factioning. You see all kind of incoherence. And that is something that I am concerned about, because I see conservative groups attacking other conservative groups. And I'm like, your points are not necessarily invalid, but we got to stay focused on what the real problem is here.
Well, I think what I think can change the pace of what's taking place is Christian people. I'm not I'm not dedicated to being a Republican, If the Republican Party started representing things I disagreed with, I wouldn't have any problem voting different. But you've got too many Republicans that they'll vote Republican just because that's the way it is, and it's always been that way. Since everybody converted to being Republican, everybody in their family, especially in the South. So that's what we've got people that have listened to this podcast all over the country. So they may not understand what I'm saying. I'm trying to slow down here. Especially in the South, because I came from a family of Southern Democrats. I mean, just a county over from where we're sitting right now, my family, they were a main political party in Southern Democrat Party. One was a commissioner. His brother was the sheriff. Small town kind of stuff. I mean, that's the way that my family was. I've got a lot of ancestors that probably wouldn't be too happy to know that I voted Republican. But they were conservative people.
Right.
And so we've seen those lines change so much that I have further and further separated myself from being this Republican conservative. Rather, I felt my obligation and my duty as a Christian to identify and say, you know what, this is what the Bible say. This is what the Bible says about these issues. This is what the Bible says about, abortion or, same-sex marriage or whatever it may be. And I'm going to stand on those because the Bible is my ultimate and final authority that I use. If conservatives want to see change and they want to come together, then it's going to have to be led spiritually by people that say, you know what, I have standards and I have beliefs based upon Scripture, and that's what I'm going to stand on. You go back to the Revolution, and you find that it was generally people led by their spiritual beliefs rather than their dedication to some political party. Matter of fact, political parties were something that they didn't necessarily want. You can't avoid it, but now the church is factioned out. And it's been this over 2,000 years since Christ ascended. You've seen the church get divided and divided and divided to where, you've got this dude. I was just listening to this podcast last night about this guy that wrote a book called The Woke Church. I mean, that's the mindset is like, now, we got to, maybe we're not preaching the whole gospel. Maybe we got to go back and realize that we've got to apply it to, racism and homophobia and all. No, shut your mouth. The Bible speaks against sin in all shapes, all forms, all sizes. And it doesn't discriminate against a black sinner or a white sinner. It doesn't care what color you are. It gets in there regardless. And so if we want to see the ability, because we've talked about this, how there's this clear understanding of we're coming to that good versus evil battle. It's not this party versus this party, this group versus this group. And Christians are going to have to get together and say, you know what? I don't care what the Republicans say. I don't care what the libertarians or the Democrats or the conservative groups say, because it's getting to the point where it's hard to say, well, I'll say I'm a conservative, but even still, there's groups and factions in the conservative that are crazy. And just say, hey, I'm a Christian. This is what the Bible says. This is where I'm going to stand. Unless we can do that, it's going to be hard to fight these people.
Well, I do see that there is that kind of dividing line in all of these groups. So instead of it being like right versus left, within each group there's a kind of duality. So within the conservative movement, you have really kind of like hard-lined Christian traditional America First conservatives versus the squishes, versus the rhinos, versus the kind of middling quote unquote Republicans, but who aren't really willing to stand up for conservative issues or take a stand morally on things, or they're socially liberal or whatever. But then also too, like in the Christian community, you see this same kind of dividing line where even though you've got all these different denominations and all these different churches, this is bringing out a thing where most of the churches now are having to pick a side on these issues, like Black Lives Matter. So you're seeing, and the people who are woke and for it are going like full on woke.
Yeah, they love it.
And it's bringing all those kinds of people together. And then, but the people who are against it are having to speak out real loudly against it. And it's bringing all those people together in a way that I think is is nice. It's refreshing to me because like I've been watching, Apologia Studios, that guy.
Yeah.
Like I've been watching his stuff, which I probably never would have a few years ago. He was like in a different part of the Christian world.
Right.
But now he's saying the truth about this stuff. And it makes me be like, oh, he gets it.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of that. So there is a kind of bringing together of different factions under this duality of like, are you woke or are you not?
Yeah.
And then in the conservatives, are you traditional? Are you going to stand for religious principle, or are you a libertarian, socially liberal, squishy, softy Republican?
Right.
And then on the left, you have the same duality, same divide. Are you a full-on communist anarchist ready to tear down statues and erase gender and everything?
Yeah.
Or are you a, like old school, middle of the road, pro-American liberal, you know? And so in all of these different realms, we're seeing this clear divide come up, but it's bringing people together in interesting ways.
I think it's important for people to start using good spiritual sources. I mean, I've gotten to the point where even down to the political commentary I listen to, I've tried to focus on more of a biblical, spiritual background with those people. I used to, just as long as they were conservatives, I was fine.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, man, I've almost also been fooled by this political system of like, the conservatives they'll get me through. And kept that separate. And now I see that, you can't keep God in a nation just with a political party.
Right.
It takes biblical spiritual leaders to do that.
Yeah.
And we've got pastors that are choosing to stand up and say, we don't agree with this. We've got pastors that are bowing down to the mess.
Yep.
Really, the main issue I have is a lot of these churches have to bring it up and talk about it. That falls back on the leadership of the church, I believe, in a lot of cases. Now, if you have a spiritually immature church member that comes and says, well, I don't really understand how I should view this social justice movement as a Christian. Well, they've been a Christian for a month, They haven't had time to really grow to that point. And it's probably very concerning as a new Christian right now to know where you stand on all this stuff.
Yeah.
But we've got churches and we've got people in churches of all denominations that have been sitting in those churches for literally years. And they're like, well, what do we believe about abortion? You've been a deacon at this church for 30 years and you can't tell me what you believe about abortion. That's a shame.
Yeah.
And it's the lack of leadership in these churches. And they're spineless men that stand behind pulpits every Sunday. Yeah. They don't care about their church people. And all they preach about is either how to succeed in life, 10 ways to succeed in life, like Joel Osteen, or they push some kind of specific agenda tied to whatever faction of the church they're part of. And
in a feel-good, emotional base.
Well, you've got that on one side, but there is also a very much, I want to say this the right way. You've got the feel-good side, but you've also got the very blunt, rude, blunt side. There's one thing. It's one thing to be blunt and be right about your bluntness, because to be maybe not okay. You've got bluntness and boldness. I think bluntness always comes across the wrong way because you don't care what you're saying or how you're saying it. Boldness comes across sometimes in a wrong way, but it's not your problem. If you're bold in Christ and you offend everybody and you hair lip the Pope, it doesn't matter because you've been emboldened by Christ. Right. If you're this and you've got this blunt mentality of like, I mean, and even preachers and pastors in my community that I know that I friends with on Facebook, their attitude, COVID starts and they're like, we're not allowing you to have church right now just to be safe because we don't know what it looks like.
Right.
Now I'm a pastor. My church had service. We haven't missed one service.
Yeah.
But we have 10 to 15 people. So it's very, very small church community. So we were never, honestly, since COVID started, we've been below 10 people mostly. Yeah. And so we haven't had to worry about it. But I've got pastor friends that pastor 200 and 300 people, and they did have to worry about it.
Yeah.
And they said, all right, we don't like not being able to have service, but we're going to honor and follow the rules of the land, the laws of the land, and their biblical duty is to follow that and at least give it a chance. And they tried it, and you see churches being able to go back, and then we see, especially here in North Carolina, our governor's he's doing some crazy things with his rules and laws, and I don't know that it'll be much longer before they're told to go back. And I'll be honest with you, I got a lot of pastors, friends, and preachers I know, they saw the spiritual fallout of being told to stay home, and they won't close their doors back.
Yeah.
What I'm saying all that to go back and say is there's this group of just absolutely blunt, rude preachers that from the beginning, they're like, well, I ain't closing my doors.
Oh, yeah.
At the beginning.
Right.
And they had this nasty attitude about, well, I'm not doing this. The Bible, I agree with you. The Bible's, tells us to assemble together. But we also need to set an example for our church people that they can see that we're trying to honor and follow the rules and laws set in front of us.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of the churches have been burned by the government rules and regulations because it's like, well, you can't do this. Now they're trying to tell churches not to have singing. That's not the government's position to do that.
Right.
So now when churches are a little more hesitant to follow whatever the government says to do, I believe we've given them a chance. And if we choose to go a different way, in boldness of Christ and say, we're not closing our doors back.
Well,
we're right.
We are in a situation now where it is not clear cut what is constitutional and not constitutional about all these lockdown policies.
Right.
And it's like, for the one, we're supposed to follow the law, but not if the law is against our faith, and particularly in America, not if the law is unconstitutional. And with all of these, we're seeing this now with all these lockdowns. It's like, well, because I feel the same conflict. It's like, well, I want to be a law-abiding citizen. I really do. But what's going on right now, I don't think the government has the right to do it. Yeah.
Oh, exactly.
So like, at what point do we say we're not going to comply with this stuff?
Yeah.
And I saw, and this goes to the mask thing, because this has become an issue all over the place. Because a lot of people a lot of states are mandating masks everywhere in public.
Yeah.
Period. And we've got it here. But you're starting to see, just yesterday in Oklahoma, they had a mask mandate protest. A bunch of people got out and they're like, we don't agree with this. The government doesn't have the power to do it. And most of them they're not radical. They're like, you know what? If we go to work and our boss wants us to do it, we'll do it.
Yeah.
Out of respect for our employer or whatever. But we don't like it. We don't agree with it. And we're going to resist it in as much as we have the power to.
Yeah.
And it's just it's a crazy thing. Does the government have the constitutional authority to tell people they have to cover their faces? It would be one thing if there was a disease with like a 40% mortality rate and a bunch of kids were dying, then maybe it's something we could all rally behind.
Yeah.
But
I'll tell you where they
something
lost
like
me.
This. What?
They lost me with the mask thing. I'm like, all right, if it's safest to wear a mask, I'll wear a mask. But then the rioters, there's nobody saying,
oh yeah,
especially on the left, like, hey, you need to go back inside because COVID is just killing everybody.
Yeah.
And when I saw that, and I saw the George Floyd funeral and Rayshard Brooks funeral, and there's 1 million people there, and a friend of mine couldn't even go. They couldn't even have a funeral service for his dad because, of what was going on. I was done. I'm like, you know what? This is all politically motivated because it's 2020 and it's an election year.
Yeah.
If this was 2021 or 2017, it wouldn't be this way. And so that was it for me. Now, I went into Walgreens today, and I have like a bandana thing.
Yeah.
And I put that on. Number one, I've got a pregnant wife. and I'd like not to give her coronavirus. But that's my choice. I chose to do that.
Exactly.
We walked into a grocery store a few weeks ago,
Yep.
you and I, and neither one of us had masks on.
Right.
People were looking at me like I was crazy. I don't care. If you want to be a sheep, you be a sheep. But like, you're just allowing the government just to tell you what to do. And I mean, it's, yes, you know, and people, well, I've got freedom to do this and do that. Do we really understand? And your video was great about freedom. Freedom and liberty are very different.
Yeah.
And we know that there are consequences. See, liberty is what's so important is understand we have a liberty to do something is you have freedom to do that with no consequences, because what that is not breaking a law.
Yeah.
And then freedom, there are consequences to those things. So it's coming to a point in time where, you know, well, you choose to go shoot somebody because you feel like you have the freedom to carry a gun.
Yeah.
There's a consequence. There's a negative consequence to that. But there are also instances and lines that need to be drawn, and understand that there may be a day we walk into a store and we don't wear a mask because we feel like we you know, the government's place is not to tell us what to do.
Yeah.
Like that. And by freedom, we do that, but we do have consequences to standing against that.
Right.
That's what's going to tell the test for a lot of people. That's what's going to, you know, tell a story for a lot of people of, you know, people are just, they're falling into it, and just churches and schools and everything have been shut down, and we're literally grooming ourselves to do whatever the government says.
That's the big point to me is, and this COVID thing is really testing my limits of not believing or not looking at things in a conspiracy theory kind of lens. I always resist that. Mm-hmm. Anything like this, I'm always like, well, it's not really, people aren't really trying to control people, and it's not really a mass planned thing. It's just, you know, people are just doing what they're doing. But with this COVID thing, I swear, man, it's like, they were, okay, the powers that be really are pushing this thing for political purposes. And I see it in two ways. One, it's politically motivated in election year terms, because it's very beneficial to not have to have Joe Biden out on the campaign trail.
Because he's awful
at
campaigning.
Right. And then it's also very beneficial to keep Trump from being able to have his rallies.
Because he's great at campaigning.
So, like, I get the political motivation from the left of, like, let's just keep these lockdowns in place. This helps everybody out. But also there's a more sinister element of it, which is, let's see how, and again, like, I usually resist this kind of like conspiratorial thinking, but I just can't help but see it. Like, these people are trying to see to what degree people will comply. Yeah. How far can we push these them? People and they'll bow to it? Yeah. And masking up everywhere you go in public, that's a pretty big demand. Yeah. And everybody's pretty much going along with it.
And remember the TP debacle of 2020. There's no toilet paper. Yeah. And then you go into stores and they say, well, you can only buy this much. You can only have this much. You can only do this. You can only do, you know, you can only have this many people inside. You have to wear a mask. You have to do this. Yeah. They have you can't be out past 8:00 p.m. or what, you know. It's if this virus, like, I'm going to catch it at 2:00 in the evening, I'm going to get it at 9:00 at night. I mean, and I get it. Like, I have both sets of my grandparents, and I've got one set of grandparents. Their health's not as great as my other set of grandparents, but I've got all four of my grandparents still living, and that's just a blessing from God. That you know, I'm almost 25 years old and I still have all my grandparents. I don't want them to get coronavirus, because while I could probably pretty easily come back from coronavirus as a healthy, semi-healthy person. I'm overweight, but, as a pretty healthy, guy in my mid-20s, that's something that's probably like the flu for me. Yeah. Somebody in their 70s or 80s, it's harder for them to recover, and that's just the fact of the matter. Yeah. But that's the case with the flu. That's the case with tuberculosis.
With literally everything.
Whatever it is, like breaking your leg. Like, you can, an 89-year-old person can break their leg and die just because it's like, you're 89 years old. Your body's not conditioned to go and recover like it used to. And so what they've been able to do is, it came at a perfect time. I think China was there's going to be a sniper get us here in a few minutes, but China was tired of the protests they were having. Yeah. They set out this, and I'm becoming more of a conspiracy theorist. And it's not conspiracies are a real thing when they're actually allowed to come out to the public.
Yeah.
But China sees that their people want what we have here. Hey, they don't care to kill their own people. They never have, really. I mean, they're like, well, hey, it's just people. We don't care.
Yeah.
And so they let this thing go, and here we are. And the people against President Trump are able to use it as this wonderful tool to just hoe out any weeds that they want to get out of the garden and anything they deem as weeds.
Yeah.
But what we're doing is you've got the wrong people tended to the garden, and they're not destroying weeds, they're destroying the crops.
Yeah.
And the stuff that produces. They're destroying the businesses. They're destroying. It's hurting churches. Public schools. A lot of them don't teach anything worth having anyway. So that's one thing for me. That's just my personal viewpoint. Both my parents work for the public school system, so I'm sorry, but some things are good. In our line of work in the financial industry, this has been great for me in how it's changed our day-to-day operation.
Yeah.
It's helped my job for
sure.
But when I leave work, I'm back in this real world of like, oh man, I can't go into Walmart without having a mask on, or there can only, I can't go to, we haven't went to a restaurant in 4 months.
Yeah.
So part of me, that's okay. Cause I'd rather just be at home. But then the other part of me is like, I have that little bit of, I have a lot of that American blood that's like, you can't tell me I can't, I can't do that.
Well, for me personally, I don't really mind that much because I strive to not need the world anyway, So like if I just have to stay home and raise my kids and take care of my house and go pick up groceries every once in a while, that's fine.
Yeah.
I could be dead, or I could be living in Soviet Russia in the 70s,
Yeah.
But
anywhere other than America.
Or anywhere other than America in 2020. But what's really hard for me is to watch everybody else how they're reacting to it.
Yeah.
And it's very worrying to me. So it's fine if you're a business and you decide as a business that you want to enforce masks and you want to enforce things a certain way. Mm-hmm. Fine, your business, you can do what you want. You can set whatever policy you want in your stores, and people we're going to have to do it if we want to do business there.
Yeah.
That's a perfectly fine American way, right?
Yeah.
But I think that what's happening is that there's a lot of business owners who don't really agree with it, but they're going along with it.
Yeah.
Because they feel like they have to. They don't want to get in trouble, or they don't whatever. And that's what's concerning for me, because I want to believe that I live in an America where people will not put up with tyrannical overreach of the government.
Yeah.
And they'll say, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing it. But you still don't see that anywhere.
Right.
I think there's basically 3 groups right now with the COVID thing. There's a group of people who are legitimately scared and concerned and freaked out about it. And I know some of these people. I think they're wrong, but I think they're honest about how they feel about it. And then on the other extreme, there's people like me who think this is all way out of proportion. It's way overblown. It's not that dangerous that everybody's making it out to be. If it was up to me, we'd all be going around and living life like normal, pretty much.
And we'd be a lot farther along.
Yeah. And, keep the old people at home. That's fine. Be really careful with that kind of stuff. But by and large, all the rest of us need to go about our lives. And then there's people in the middle who don't really agree with all the COVID stuff, but they're going along with it because they feel social pressure to.
Yeah.
And that's what's concerning for me is those people.
Yeah.
Those are the people that I want to say, don't go along with it. If you don't agree with it, you need to be vocal about it, because otherwise the rest of us, we're not a big enough faction to push back against this effectively. We need everybody to be a little bolder about this. If you disagree with it, you need to say so forcefully. And it's getting to be like this weird social thing where the last 2 weeks I was at the corporate center where we work doing training, and everybody in there, you're supposed to wear a mask inside at all times, right? That's the policy. So I go in there, no mask at any time, of course, because I'm just like, if somebody tells me to put a mask on, I'll put it on. I'm
Yeah.
at work. It's my job. I just, if somebody comes up to me and if HR comes up and they're like, hey, you need to put a mask on, I'll put the mask on. I'm not going to talk back to HR
Sure.
at the corporate center or whatever. But until then, I'm going to just
Do your thing.
I'm going to do my thing.
Right.
And until somebody tells me, I'm just going to do the thing. 9 out of 10 people in there were wearing their masks. There are a few people who weren't, who are all men, by the way. There's a few men who are like, I don't care about this.
Men cause most of the world's problems.
Yeah, most men they don't care.
Yeah.
But there was this weird social thing where I could tell that like most of the people with masks on, they didn't really want them on.
Yeah.
And I could tell that a lot of them were. There's a lot of situations where I'd be around people and they weren't like looking at me directly, or they weren't interacting with me directly because I'm here making some kind of political statement by not being muzzled.
Am I going to get an email about this next week? Like, are they going to email me and be like,
Probably
you need
so.
to discipline your
Probably
employee?
so.
Wonderful.
But I just thought it was so interesting to see this social thing where like some people, they don't agree with it, but they're going along with
They'll
it.
do it. Yeah.
But they're keeping their heads down.
Yeah.
And it's such a shame to me. They're just keeping their heads down. They're going along. I'm like, don't go along.
Yeah.
Because people need to know. People need to know how you feel. People need to make their voices heard about this issue, about BLM, about everything that's going on. This is America. People need to engage their freedom of speech. You're not here to go along with whatever the powers that be tell you.
Yeah.
That's not what the American system is about. You are here to express your view because the government works for you.
No, that's right.
You own the police department. You own the city council. This is your country. It's we the people.
Yeah.
And we've got to speak up instead of just taking whatever we're told to do.
And that's why the relationship with work is different. When it first started at work, because folks, we work together in the financial industry. We see customers day to day. And, at first, some of our folks were putting gloves on and wearing their gloves and wiping things down. And that's fine. Like I'm all, whatever. At first, I was more concerned because I didn't know what it was going to look like by this point in time. And now I'm like, this is pretty much a political sham. There are people that have it. I know young, healthy people that have had it and said that it's awful. But, so it's real, but it's like the flu or anything else you can catch. Work comes and says, well, you've got to wear a mask. Like, okay. If you're in front of a customer, you got to wear a mask. I'll do it because I work for you. While you don't own me as a company, it feels like you do sometimes.
Right.
While you don't own me as a company, you pay my bills.
Right.
You help me pay my bills. You faithfully put my paycheck in my account.
Yeah.
I get health insurance, life insurance. I'm like, that's the relationship of that business. If it's required by my work to do it, I'll do it because my relationship's different. If I want to say, you know what, I don't like your policy, I want to go down the road and work somewhere else, I can.
Yep.
The government's relationship's a lot different.
Yep.
And the government's become monopolized. It's become to these people, the Ruth Bader Ginsburgs and the Nancy Pelosi's and the, these jokers, these people that literally they're old as, Moses' sandals are, they're still in political positions. Joe Biden, he, before you or I, either one were alive, he had a political career.
Yep.
They want to act like that's what they've pushed into their brain is that we've got to help the people control. We've got to make sure that we see more than they see. We know a little bit more about certain things and we can see the long term. No, you don't, because you only see what makes you money and gets you votes.
Oh, yeah.
And so my work's not that way because that's my relationship. Yeah, they see what makes them money, but if I want to separate myself from that, I can.
Right.
And so as a nation, I'm an American citizen. The relationship's different. They don't just tell me what to do and me just say, oh yeah, I can. No, because now if we were in any other country, that would be the case.
Yeah.
But we're not. And that's probably one of my bigger issues is that we're not one of these other countries out there. We're America. We question things that
Right.
other people don't question. We stand against things other people don't stand against. I think what's going to tell the tale about people and how far they'll be pushed with COVID is the vaccine.
Yeah.
And here's with work. Here's what will change. Work comes and tells me I need to put a mask on. Now, I put my mask on, and by the end of the day, I feel like I have a third lung. But I sleep all night, and I go to work the next day, and I'm fine.
Yeah.
Work comes to me and tells me I have to take a vaccine to be able to come back to work. They'll have my resignation.
Yeah.
Because that's not their place.
No.
And, while masks have negative health effects, I believe it's not necessarily going to kill me. I can get enough time with the mask off. I'm fine. But the moment they come and say, you got to take a vaccine to work here, that's the moment I tell them to fly a kite.
Yeah.
Now, the government, I guess the same thing with the government. This is the bear they're poking that they don't realize they're poking. This is that rattlesnake we've talked about in the corner.
Yeah.
Of, well, as an American citizen, to be in compliance and not get in trouble, you're going to have to take a vaccine. What does that sound like? Everything that this whole faction on the left, radical left, wants to push and do. Antifa, Black Lives Matter, those groups like that, radical liberals, they love that. We'll tell you what to do and you do it. And they will follow that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because the government has our best interest. They absolutely despise Donald Trump. But if the government come out and said, and when I say government, I realize Donald Trump's the head of the government.
Right.
But the deep-rooted liberal liberal groups inside of the government,
right.
If they come out and say, well, you need to take a vaccine, 90% of these real dedicated liberals will get in line to take a vaccine. But we hate Donald Trump, the head of the government.
Yeah.
It goes back to their sheep. They have followed whatever the government said for all these years.
Yeah.
And what it is that they're not willing to stand against. They'll stand against one person, but they won't stand against that institution because their minds have been groomed to think that everything that a government pushes and does and says is for your best interest. Yeah. And that's not the case. Watch out for the snipers.
I mean, the vaccine thing is very interesting. I've been thinking about this a lot too, because that's definitely going to be like the next step of trying. Let's see if we can mandate this thing. We can mandate that everybody has to get it. And I'm like, okay, I don't think people. By people, I mean the government bureaucracy. I don't know if they realize it or not that like people are not going to comply with that. There's going to be, just like there are now, there's going to be a segment of people who are going to do it just because they're terrified of the coronavirus and they're like, oh, thank God, a vaccine's here. There's going to be another segment of people who are going to disagree with it, but they're going to go along. Just like the people with the masks who disagree, but they're going to go along. But then the people who are not wearing masks right now, they are going to revolt against that.
Oh, yeah.
Because that is going a step. I mean, it's one thing to tell people you got to go around with a face covering on. I mean, that's fairly invasive.
Yeah.
And I think that's totally unconstitutional. I totally disagree that the government has the power to do that.
Right.
But to make you take a vaccine, and it's not even about like whether the vaccine is a totally normal, healthy thing like the flu shot, or whether or not it's some kind of a evil microchip from Soros designed to, like that's not even the issue.
No, I don't care if it makes me rich and makes me 3 inches taller.
Right. It's the fact that of the government forcing that on you. Right. Like that being that invasive in your body.
That's communist.
That's absolutely
socialist.
Unacceptable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and that's that is what it roots back. If the government can say that, if they can get to that point with a vaccine, to where they can successfully say, you have to take this, we'll be lost. Well, we will literally shift into that socialist
I feel like
culture.
That's how I feel about the COVID thing. That's what's going on right now. And that's why I'm so disappointed with people, because I'm like, I'm not saying that like masks are never a great idea. I'm not saying that social distancing is not I'm not saying that coronavirus is not a real virus or that doesn't. I'm not saying any of that. I'm saying the government can't tell us individually how we're all going to deal with this.
Right.
The government can't blanket come in and shut down all the businesses in the state. They do not have the authority to do that. They do not have the authority to blanket tell every single person that they have to wear a face covering in public.
Right.
You know, like we're all adults. We're all supposed in theory, under our system,
according to their driver's license,
we're
they're
all
adults.
supposed to be able to make these decisions and take responsibility for them.
Yeah.
You know,
No,
but
true.
people are like, well, it's just a mask. This is why the mask thing I feel like is so insidious, because people will be like, what's the big deal? It's just a mask. It's not, you know, it doesn't compromise your life that much. It's not that big a deal. It's precisely because it's not that big a deal that it's so important.
Yeah, it was just the Star of David on the shoulder of the Jews.
That's exactly right. It always starts with some small little compromise because it's so hard to argue against it.
Yeah.
You know, well, what's the big deal? You know, that's a hard argument to overcome.
Well, and what they do is, if the narrative has been, we'll do this to help save people's lives.
Yeah.
And what they do is they say, well, think about your grandparents. Think about the old people in your life.
None of these people
I get
mention
it.
the death rate at all.
Right.
Have you noticed? Like, there's no mention of the death rate in the media coverage.
They did
ever.
for a while until we realized that, yeah, this guy died in a motorcycle accident, and it was ticked off as COVID.
Right.
I mean,
Even with the inflation that we see with the death rate, it's nothing.
Yeah.
It is plummeted. It's nothing, and they never talk about it.
I guess with Mask Madness, that's gonna be a central theme of our conversation today. What we've talked about with Mask Madness, you've got this lady. I say this at work a lot to people because I can tell they don't want to have their mask on, and I just try to make small talk. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, man, I hate wearing a mask.
Yeah.
Most people are like, yeah, me too. I tell you, it's awful.
Yeah.
This one lady said, well, you could be on a ventilator.
Yeah.
Like, the alternative is that you could have COVID and be on a ventilator.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I could have 3 eyes too. I mean, it's just like, it's part of life. Like, I'll try to be safe. And the lady's attitude when I said that, I was like, man, I'm just burning up in this mask. And she's like, well, you could have to wear a ventilator and have COVID, and you could get sick and make other people sick. I wish people would just stop complaining about having to wear a mask. And I'm like, wow. She's really sensitive about mask.
Yeah.
Like, if the president was the one that came out and said we all need to wear a mask, they would have lost their minds.
Oh yeah.
But you've got liberal state governments have pushed a lot of this, and then they enabled a lot of the Black Lives Matter movement stuff, and then they enabled a lot of the anarchy, and then they've enabled people to murder people and no consequences. Murder children.
Yeah.
And so it's like, that's what she's been groomed and taught to think. It's like, your alternative is to be on a ventilator. Well, no, I try to be safe, and if I feel the need to wear a mask, I'll wear one. And if not, I won't. I mean, and then I take the chance. But I take the chance of walking outside and getting struck by lightning. I mean, I take the chance of somebody breaking into my house and killing me in my sleep. Like, we take a lot of chances just walking through day-to-day life. But people have subscribed to this mindset, and they're slaves to it. And, oh, gosh, I shouldn't have said that.
You said the S word.
I said the S word. And, literally, that's...
Sorry, he means prisoners with jobs.
No, I know. They're literally in bondage to the mindset that if you don't wear a mask, you and everyone you love are going to die. They are slaves to fear. And that's the worst form of slavery, is that in your own mind, you're bound down to something, and you won't allow yourself to live in liberty and freedom because you're bound to that mindset.
It's a mindset of let's remove all risk from life.
Right.
Because no risk is acceptable.
Yeah.
We need a completely risk-free, danger-free zone to live in. And that is just not... There's no reward in that. No. There's no possibility for reward or growth or anything in that kind of mindset. But like I say on this podcast, that is mama mindset. And that's that's mama has taken over our society. And that's the mindset we're all living in, of mama's just like, we got to totally protect the children. They can't be exposed to any danger. There can be no risk in life. We've got to just have it all sealed up tight. And it's like, no, you need to go out there and risk the flu and risk, your health is meant to be spent and risked. You're going to die. You're going to get sick. Yeah. You're going to die. You can't avoid these things forever. We can't all walk around in little bubbles with face masks on, you know. What kind of world is that? There's no life in that. There's no challenge. There's no reward. Life is risk. Life is exposure to danger. That's what it is. And we've completely lost that in our culture. And it's sad.
It is.
All right.
You want to talk about Nick Cannon?
Oh, my God.
And whiteness. Are we going to talk about whiteness first? The whiteness pamphlet?
Well, these things go together.
They go together.
Because Nick Cannon was, you know.
I don't mean to interrupt you.
Okay.
But I just want to start this because this episode is called Mask Madness and the Fourth Reich. Because this is literally the new Nazi party. I'm serious. It is the new Nazi party, and they hate whites, and they hate Jews.
Here's the crazy thing about the radical left right now is that they seem to be completely blind as to how similar they are to the early days of the Nazis.
Yeah.
And I think about this with Antifa. These people go around in black clothes with sticks and weapons.
It's fascist.
Inciting violence to stop fascism.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Literally, I saw this thing today. Let me pull it up. And then we'll have to talk about Nick Cannon. He's so smart and inspiring.
Well, Nick Cannon's just saying, I mean, I've heard that rap before from, you know, the Louis Farrakhan types in the black community. I mean, I've heard this thing for a decade. And there was a time in my life when I was an insane person on the left where I thought, maybe there's something to this. Luckily,
to the white privilege, or
no, to the black people being genetically superior to white people.
For shame.
I know.
Only in sports. So I'm just kidding. But
there's this idea that melanin is like this magic thing. And melanin is what connects you to the creator, and melanin is what connects you to the source of spirit and all this kind of stuff. And so black people are just closer to God.
That's why Africa's so developed.
They're closer to right. Yeah, exactly right. That's why Nick Cannon, he has a really hard time trying to, now I'm going to explain why
Africa's
white
great.
Europeans were so developed in their civilization and they couldn't fend off. And the Africans
literally,
couldn't
Western
fend them
civilization has made him everything he is because if his family if he still lived in Africa, I mean, they don't have anything.
This is the crazy thing.
Literally, the whole continent doesn't have anything.
Right. Well, the thing about Nick Cannon's rant was that everything he was saying was such an obvious projection and such an obvious inversion of reality, because he was talking about how white people don't have compassion, right? They're incapable of it because white people don't have enough melanin to have that spirit in them.
Yeah.
Right. Melaninated people have all the compassion. I'm like, is that why y'all are murdering each other in droves in Chicago every weekend? You know, is it compassion that killed all those kids over July 4th weekend?
Yeah.
You know, is that compassion? What's going on?
So tell me the difference there, because there's obviously a few different types of melanin. Because what about the African slave traders that were black that sold
Where's their compassion?
their African brethren
Where's
into
their
slavery
compassion?
to the English and the Dutch and the French and whoever else needed to go buy some slaves?
And he was talking about how because white people lack melanin, they don't have compassion and they're like a lower form and they're like more like animals and they're violent and all this stuff. And I'm like,
dude, that's crazy.
Dude,
because I didn't listen to it, so
I'm like, white people are violent and animalistic. Have you not seen what's been going on for the last 2 months out on the streets?
Yeah.
You know, that's just crazy talk.
And there are plenty of white people in the middle of it, but there are
there
lot.
are plenty of white people in the middle of it, but black people are on the rampage right now.
But that goes back to sin. I mean, it doesn't it's not. Anyway, so this is a direct comparison, in fact, a direct fascism comparison. And so it says torch places of worship. Of course, it's got a picture of a synagogue the Nazis burned down, and then it's got a picture of the church in Washington that they lit on fire.
Yep.
And then it's got destroyed businesses, and it's got where they painted Jude on the window of a Jewish owned business in Poland. And it's got kill cops beside it in I think probably Seattle or something. And then it says, or actually probably our town. and then violently attacked political enemies. And so that was the Nazi Party's way of coming to power.
Yeah.
It was literally the night of the long knives. You know, the story about that. They basically went and the Nazis basically went and killed a ton of their political enemies. I mean, you know, it's just a regular old Saturday night for
good old
Adolf and his pals. And but that's what we're seeing from these groups.
Yeah.
And what's greatly concerned me about this mindset and made me think that, you know, the true enemy is, you know, sin, but also fascism and all these things wrapped up into one bundle, was the anti-Semitic mindset that we're seeing a lot, because that's so blatantly evil. And it's not that it offends me more. I've never identified with the white groups of people. Like, I don't, like, I'm white and I don't, you know, like, I don't care. I mean, there's a lot of white people I don't like. There's a lot of white people I do like. I mean,
for sure.
But I've never been like, you know, my white brothers.
Yeah.
Like, I've never been like that. Right. White culture is very different.
White people got to stick together.
No, right. I've never cared about that. That doesn't matter to me. What I was always raised in, you know, especially in growing up in the mountains, you've got the culture of a lot of Scotch-Irish culture that was emphasized. The family history was emphasized. That culture of, you know, clan culture, CLAN, not KLAN culture, was emphasized, of like your family, and that mindset was emphasized. But it didn't have to do with being white. Like, nobody in my family's like, man, I'm so glad we're white. We would just make it, we'll make life what it is out of any color. Yeah. I mean, matter of fact, there's lots of different, you know, you look at my ancestry tree and you see all kinds of different, you know, countries of origination. White people in America are not really as white as they think. We don't, you know, a lot of white people there. You've got Jewish family tied in, African. I've got some African ancestry in my family tree. Yeah. I mean, am I in line for reparations? I don't know.
Maybe you'll get like 5%.
Right. Native American.
Yeah.
I mean, so I'm not really, I'm not like this white person, but I am.
Right.
But I've never been like, man, I'm glad I'm at least, you know, 50% white or 75% white or 90% white. That's the good part of me.
Yeah.
I've never been that way. I just don't care. Like, there's good people and there's bad people. Yes. I don't care what color they are. So that's what Nick Cannon's not understanding. Mm-hmm. And what's his sentiment? What's he out there talking about?
Well, I mean, his thing is like, he's doing straight up racism the way we used to use the word, which is that, you know, people have unalterable group characteristics based on their genetics.
Right.
Basically. That's what racism used to mean. I don't know what it means now. Now it can mean pretty much anything. But, I mean, he's, you know, straight up saying that because white people don't have melanin, they literally don't have compassion. They don't have spirit. They're not close to God. They have all this darkness and evil and hate inside them. And this is a Hitler thing of like being like, those people have hate inside them, not us. Mm-hmm. We're good people.
Right.
We don't have it. That's whenever you engage in evil, it's because you're denying your own evil, right? I mean, this is pretty much just basic. You know, you have to repent and accept your own evil for you to get on any kind of road towards goodness.
Right.
Right. And when you refuse to do that, you always end up committing evil acts, right? Because you're judging other people according to their evil and not realizing that we're all in the same boat.
It's kind of like you point one finger and there's three pointing back at you.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what Nick Cannon's doing. He's saying that, you know, white people are innately evil, mean-spirited,
which to my understanding
animalistic,
was completely ignored.
So, yeah, that whole tirade he went on, nobody said a word about that. That is no problem at all. In fact, a lot of people backed him up, like P. Diddy and some other like people in that world. But later on in that tirade, he started going on about the kind of his Hebrew Israelite thing about how like black people are the real Jews, you know, and Jews aren't the real Jews, and
which absolutely makes kind of thing, zero sense.
I truly don't. And I've listened to the Hebrew Israelites just out of curiosity for a long time because they're so like cuckoo and
Yeah.
it's so fun to listen to them. And I've never really understood their case, but basically,
They call themselves the Black Hebrew
Right.
Israelites. Because calling yourself a Hebrew Israelite just says you're a Jew.
right.
Black Hebrew Israelite is like, yeah, we were in Africa, but we're truly God's
Yeah.
people. We had to. Anyway, it's crazy.
But it
we
was
could get
the,
into some.
it was the anti-Semitism that Nick Cannon got fired over.
Yeah.
Right.
Which, and firing people doesn't do away with their views. It actually solidifies it for a lot of people. And somebody like him,
Right.
who's got as much money as he does, he'll be a racist the rest of his life, probably
Yeah.
more so than he ever has been because of that. It's just concerning to me. And the reason I go so far and say the Fourth Reich, I don't even know if they're in line like that. I don't care. But it's just fun to say that. The reason I say that this is the new Nazi Reich, like this is a new Nazi party, because it's like this political movement for political power to destroy any political opposition.
And it's based on identity politics.
Right.
It's based on racial identity politics.
Yep.
It's based on the presumption that the people involved we're the good people.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with us. We're pure. We're good. And those other people are nasty and evil, and they deserve what's coming to them.
Yep. And it sounds like Adolf Hitler.
Yeah, it's the same thing. And just like
it's
we
crazy.
talked about last time, they're playing the same blame game that Hitler played.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, we've been oppressed, we've been held down. It's those people's fault. Let's go kill them and take their stuff.
Yeah.
Because we have every right to do so.
And the Nazi Party had a lot of hobbies. And by saying that, what I mean is you had Nazi youth, you had Nazi paramilitary, you had Nazi political group, you had Nazi this, Nazi police. And this group out there, they haven't said their name yet, because I believe that all what we're seeing is Antifa, the Democratic Party, Black Lives Matter, the Black Hebrew Israelites, which has a little bit more bearing now than I thought. They're going to roll up into one group.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, like, the Nazis knew we got to get the youth culture. We've got to get the paramilitary groups together. We've got to enforce things. We've got to get police together to patrol things. We've got to get a political group together. And they knew that they couldn't just stand up as one group and be able to answer all the problems, answer all the questions to why Germany was failing. So in America's failing in the minds of a lot of these people. And they know that they have to get together. The youth groups, they take the college group, roll that up, that liberal college group, in with Antifa, in with Black Lives Matter, in with the Democratic Party, because I think the Democratic Party is going to be kind of soaked up into this socialist movement.
Oh, it's already happened.
And
it's already happening.
So,
Yeah.
And so then there will be with this one party.
Yeah.
And that's going to be who will stand against.
Well, it's so interesting, the blindness and stupidity around history with this stuff, because, the difference between this new, what you're calling the Fourth Reich, and...
I think I'm going to trademark
that's good stuff. The difference between that and Nazi Germany is that Nazi Germany was all done kind of under the banner of nationalism. It was done under the banner of Germany.
Yeah.
This new thing is not like that.
Right.
It's not like, oh, this is about America. It's not like that at all. But all people can see is just like, that's like the wrapper for Nazi Germany was like the nationalist part.
Yeah.
All people can see is the wrapper.
Mm-hmm.
So now conservatives who are nationalists, people think, oh, that they're fascists.
Yeah.
Because nationalism equals fascism. No. The problem with Hitler was not that he was patriotic, and the problem with the Nazis were not that they were nationalists. The problem with them was that they were evil. They blamed other people for their problems. They wanted to destroy people based on racial identity politics.
Right.
All of those things that were the real problem with the Nazis are the problem with the radical left.
Yeah.
But it's the nationalists who are the Nazis? No, that's not how this works. That's just the candy coating. That's just the wrapper.
Well, and what, like, Nazi Germany eventually did was once they got into political power, they were able to. They were told not to make weapons or have weapons. World War I, it was pretty clear to them after World War I not to do that, but they did. But when you see that come up is when the Nazi Party actually went into power. So what we see right now is we've got this, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, all these groups. They're not armed really right now.
Yeah,
it's very small. Your true blue criminals who have always been criminals, that's the ones that got the guns.
Yeah.
If these people get into power, they'll start arming themselves.
Yeah.
And they'll start getting, organizing in that way. And then we will be Nazi Germany times 2.
Yep.
On the fourth power.
Right.
In terms of the Fourth Reich. And they'll actually start implementing, I believe, that in the country, and people may listen to this and think we're crazy. I really don't care. I just think how clearly it parallels with Nazi Germany. And you said earlier it really looks like World War I, and that's true because it's hard to see who really is on what side.
It's like a chaos
in the world, across the world. But you're right. I mean. And I don't believe that nationalism and patriotism, I believe they're very different.
Yeah.
I'm definitely not nationalist. I mean, but, I'm very patriotic in the sense of like, America is not my eternal, source of truth and happiness and holiness.
Yeah.
America could fall and I'd still be happy and holy and joyful through who I am in Christ. But it helps me be happy, peaceful, joyful, all the things that it brings.
Right.
And these people are not at all. They're not nationalists and they're not patriots.
Well, for sure.
They're wanting to dismantle everything that patriotism has built up,
right,
and create a new nationalist. Because that's the thing. They're not nationalist in the mindset of America. But once they establish whatever utopia they want, they'll be nationalist in that mindset. Yeah. And that's what I think would wrap up them. All those parties coming together, and that's what I think could wrap it up. Is Nazi Germany came in the forefront of that, and then that was their wrapper, that was their external, identifier.
Right.
What this is, I think that nationalism could or possibly wrap up on the long term of this, because they're going to say we're creating this, and you've seen the NFAC, that dude. Joker in Tennessee, Texas, that said,
Roz?
"You give us." No, that's the Seattle guy.
Oh, yeah.
Raz, man.
Raz.
Did you see him on the stretcher?
No.
You'll have to watch that afterwards. Raz, the Airbnb warlord. Anyway, so not Raz, that dude in Texas that said, you need to give us Texas, and all the black people moved to Texas. That's what they want, is their own place to control. They want to control all of America, change the name, change the flag, change the anthem. And then they'll be completely and wholly dedicated to that.
Yeah.
And then what they'll do is that's how they'll bring more people in to that, is they'll say, well, look at this utopia we've built. Look at this new nation we've created. And it can get pretty hairy at that point in time.
Yeah. And that's what's going to happen. If Biden wins in November, if you've got Biden in there and you've got, let's just imagine you've got Joe Biden presidency, you've got Democrat control of the House and the Senate. We've already got mostly Democrat mayors, mostly Democrat city council. There will be no stopping.
Hang it up, boys and girls.
There will be no stopping everything. Yeah. And what it'll be is everything will be done in the name of reparations.
Yeah.
Everything, and that'll just be kind of carte blanche.
Yeah.
For the government to basically do whatever they want.
That'll be that'll be the implementation of the socialist ideal of, like, we're giving, everybody will be able to get some kind of reparation for something. Because it's identity politics, it's victimhood of, well, I've been discriminated against because I'm, homosexual, or because I'm black, or because I'm Hispanic, or whatever. And then they'll get paid for that, and they become reliant on that government. Mm-hmm. And then you've got a communist state, because then it's oh crap, well, everything good I had, I little by little let the government take it, and now they completely control my life.
Yeah.
Tell me what to do and when to do it. And, here we are. And so then you'll have people that are upset with that. It'll create another war, because then people that didn't think they were as conservative and as patriotic, they'll become patriotic, and then you'll have another revolution on your hands, and then the idea and the identity of America has been completely lost by that point in time.
Yeah.
And then we're basically, 9th century England, like where we're just fighting constantly,
Right.
and nobody
Well,
can have anything.
If we get that weak internally, then we'll have, China, Russia,
Oh, yeah.
Iran. Well, I mean, the foreign powers will just come in and start having their way with us.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Or Donald Trump could go back into office. And while we would have to deal with his orange skin and his toupee for another 4 years,
Yep.
at least his policies are good. And I mean, the thing is, Donald Trump's not the fix to the problem, but he is the lesser of two evils. And I really don't think he's that evil of a guy. I mean,
I don't think so at all.
I think he's
and I think he's the only force that's holding all this back that we're talking about.
Yeah.
You know?
No, that's true.
And he's the only force that's keeping, but on the other hand, I think it is keeping people, like conservative, patriotic people, somewhat complacent because they're like, well, Trump's in there.
Yeah.
As long as Trump's in there, it's kind of handled.
which is making conservatives lazy, and
It's making them a little bit
not
lazy,
good either.
Yeah. So maybe we need a Joe Biden presidency.
I don't know if I would ever say that, James. I don't know that I would ever say that, because
Maybe that's the kick in the pants.
the
people
squad
need.
is really our businesses being burned down should be the kick in the pants, and that's what I don't understand.
Well,
And people are getting more. Once we get to the vaccine issue, I think once that kind of stuff, because COVID is gonna be, people. We know somebody that just got COVID in July,
yeah.
so it's not like the flu. COVID season is all day, every day.
Oh yeah.
So it's possible. It's going to be possible to contract it in cold months and warm months. COVID's not going away, as long as the powers that be can implement it where they want to. It's not going away, and so this is going to be a new norm. And then it's going to be this socially unacceptable if you don't wear a mask, or if you don't get the vaccine and people find out, we're burning you at the stake.
Yeah.
And then we've let it go so far that we're like, it's a little late to start trying to stand up for these things.
That's what I keep all year. I've been watching this stuff with the lockdowns, with the toppling of the statues, with the businesses being shut down, with the face masks, with the burning of cities. And I'm like, people are letting this happen.
Yeah.
And it's gone on so long that it's like, it's going to be too late to stand up to it. People keep just like, well, biding their time. Well, I guess this is okay. Well, this isn't so bad. But it's like we're getting in the red zone here.
Yeah, that's right. And what's another thing, and we need to probably move on to our last topic, but
Sure.
The death penalty has been utilized more in the past week than it has in the past 20 years. I'm like, this is the answer in a lot of ways. Consequences are the answer to stuff.
Consequences, yeah.
You go and you shoot a 70 or 68 or however old that officer was, that he was trying to help his friend, protect his store. You go and you shoot that guy, and you kill a retired police officer that was just trying to help his friend protect his business. Take that person in the middle of the street,
Yeah.
and shoot them in front of everyone.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds gruesome, and people say, "Well, you're a pastor; you shouldn't think that." No, okay,
Yeah, that's the kind of
problem,
softball Christianity that is causing the problem.
That's exactly right. The problem with God will forgive anyone for their transgressions. But there's some people that don't have it in their heart to ask for it because they're openly choosing to do wrong.
That's right. And retribution is a core facet of the justice system. It's like we've totally forgotten that.
Yes, I don't want to be locked up in prison for the rest of my life. But and there are people that think that, well, this person's sitting in prison for the rest of their life is justice. Well, yeah, they have to sit in prison for the rest of their life, and and they have to face that consequence, but it doesn't teach anybody else anything.
Yeah.
And also, we've forgotten that God's a just God, and those that stand before him without accepting his son as Savior, they go to an eternal hell. They go to eternal torment. God gets his vengeance on the rapist and the murderers.
Yeah.
It's not our job to do that.
Right.
It's our job to get them to that as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And I think if you rape a child, or you rape someone, or you murder someone, and we go ahead and just take you off the earth, because that's, and I'm not saying that we should have a police state where everybody gets killed.
No.
But I'm saying that there should be consequences to what you do.
Right.
And lethal
We've gone
injection
a long way from
and
that.
firing squads and hanging. Yeah, it's gruesome. But I mean, where were the days where your grandmother packed a picnic for you to go watch the guy down the street get hung?
But even short
square.
of that, I mean, this is what I'm so thankful about President Trump, is that, when all this stuff started going down, he's like, okay, you know what? You topple a federal statue, you're going to jail for 10 years.
Yeah.
It's like, yes.
Right.
Yes.
And see, that's the kind of stuff, like, I don't think you should be shot for toppling a statue over, but people that...
But there should be strong...
There should be strong... 10 years, that's 10 years to think about.
That's a long time.
Because you don't think you're doing something really big when you do it, and then you have to. The consequences need to match the crime.
Yeah,
getting shot because you topple a statue over. Yeah, that's probably a lot. But what happens is there's a gateway from minor infractions. They feel like they're like, oh man, I got away with that.
Yeah.
And so minor infractions turn into larger infractions where, you spray paint, vandalize stuff. And then, oh man, I got away with that. Now I can wear a mask because the government tells me I have to.
Yeah.
And nobody can tell who I am. Now I'm busting windows out of people's businesses and lighting them on fire. Now I'm toppling statues. Well, it's the police that are telling me not to do this, so I can go shoot them because, I've got away with all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And that's the mind of a criminal, is like, as long as they're allowed to get away with stuff, they're going to do stuff wrong.
Yeah.
And so, 10 years in prison, I wouldn't do that.
Right.
I don't want to sit in prison for 10 years. I mean, if literally that piece of granite means that much to you or offends you that much that you want to tear it down and you're willing to go to prison for that, that's your own prerogative. Yeah. Now there's people popping up full tactical gear and locking your and escorting you away. And, hey, more power to you.
Yeah.
Like, if you're willing to get drug away like that, then that's fine. And I mean, that could correlate pretty easily. We've talked about this. That can correlate pretty easy with a military state or a police state, where you've got these, like, those dudes that pick those guys up. They look like Army Rangers.
Oh yeah.
They didn't look like SWAT.
No.
They didn't even look like SWAT. That looked like people we send to, take out an ISIS camp.
Yeah, those are door kickers.
Yeah, and I'm like, part of me's like, there you go, but another part of me's like, man, that makes me feel weird as an American. Because it's like, I want these people to go to prison.
Well, that's the thing, though. Yeah, when I saw that, I'm like, hey, it does make me feel a little bit like uneasy, but at the same time, I'm like, this is what happens when you wait, when you keep waiting. You keep kicking the can down the road, not enforcing the law, not holding people accountable.
Yeah.
If you're going to kick the can down far enough down the road, it's going to be soldiers in the streets. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants that.
Right.
But at some point, you're in the red zone and something's got to be done.
Yeah. And I realize it's not KGB where, you're just sitting there not bothering anybody and you get swooped up out of but we've managed to offend about everyone in this episode.
Good. Well, do you want to?
We've offended Africans.
Let's take it a step further and talk about whiteness.
KGB. We've offended, hopefully, some white people.
Because I just want to. Okay, about this NMAAHC LMNOP pamphlet going around about whiteness. When I saw this, I just didn't know. Is this supposed to be critical? Because why
don't you explain to the group what we're talking about? Because I didn't know what it was until you showed me the other day.
This thing just started floating around on Twitter a couple days ago.
This is the National African.
It's the National Museum of African America History and Culture.
All right, I got you.
They put out this thing, and it's aspects and assumptions of whiteness and white culture in the United States, talking about race. It's a little cute little infogram thing.
Yeah.
So it's just all these bullet points about what white culture is all about.
Okay.
And first of all, I mean, it should be offensive to non-white people because it's listing all of these just great qualities in people.
Yeah.
Like hard work, objectivity, rational thinking, all this kind of
It's
stuff.
basically saying that only white people
It's
do
like saying
these
white
things
people
on
have
this
a
list.
monopoly on these things, which to me, this is very offensive to non-white people.
Yeah, exactly.
But
I
it's-
agree completely with
But
that.
as far as I can see, it's high praise to white people. I look at this.
Yeah.
When I saw this, my thought was, I wish white people were like this.
Oh, yeah.
I wish.
Because they're not.
If we lived in this world, we'd be
Yeah.
good to go. And maybe we did at some point, but it's not like this anymore. Let me read some of these. Rugged individualism. The individual is the primary unit. Well, that's true of Western civilization.
Not just white people. That's
Right.
America.
Well, that's a core premise of Western civilization.
Well, yeah.
Self-reliance.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what's wrong with that. Self-reliance.
I know a lot of self-reliant black people. I know a lot of self-reliant Asians and Hispanic folks.
Right. Individuals assumed to be in control of their environment, which I guess means like being in control like of your life. Like you get what you deserve. Mm-hmm. Right. Well, this is the mentality of successful people. Yeah. It's the mentality of successful societies.
And I mean, that's basically endorsing victimhood of like, well, I need, or reparation mindset. Yeah.
Right. I guess this is supposed to be critical. Like, white people don't understand the truth that you're a victim of your circumstances.
Right.
They're under this delusion that you get what you deserve in life.
Okay.
Right.
Well, yeah. And what I don't think they understand is you get what you deserve regardless of if you get everybody on board with this or not.
Right.
I mean, like you can get everybody on board with this right here saying, well, white people are in, denial of all these things, but
right.
you things play out regardless.
Well, here's some bullet points that are listed under Protestant work ethic. Hard work is the key to success.
Wow. That's
just true. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
That's just true. And you can say that that's the Protestant work ethic, but that's true of Chinese people. That's true of Japanese culture.
Right.
That's every successful civilization that's ever existed.
if I was, because as a white person, and like you, I'm like, man, that's a compliment.
Yeah. I wish white people were like that.
If I were an African American man working my butt off
Yeah.
to provide for my family,
Right.
or if I were a Hispanic man and I realized that there's people out there that are saying this, I would be absolutely offended. Like
Right.
I would like, and that's a reason to be offended because it's like basically saying that you can't achieve that if you're a black man or if you're a black woman or if you're Hispanic or Asian. You can't achieve that. And matter of fact, a lot, and this goes back to the nuclear family, and I believe it's on that list of black families that, we see that a lot in African American families because liberal politicians have sought to destroy the family in black communities because they can keep black families in poverty when they destroy that family and they separate dads and mothers through whatever systems they want to set up. Black families actually see more success than white families.
That's true.
When the families are together.
That is true.
And so it's like, I would be completely offended if I wasn't, if I was anybody out there trying to make a living.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Here's one. Objective, rational, linear thinking. Does that mean that non-white people do not think objectively and rationally? Or is it a problem to value objective, rational, linear thinking?
That's probably
I don't know.
what
I don't
it
get
is,
that
is
one.
That it's, well, actually, I can't think. I'm rationally trying to think about that, and there's no way that it makes sense.
Josh, you're white. You should be able to rationally think.
Well, I can rationally think. They need to just shut their mouth and stay in their corner and work hard and apply themselves to their own lives and not worry about mine.
Well, okay. A lot of this for me, this goes back to kind of what you're talking about identifying with white people or white culture and what a ridiculous category it is, because so much of this is like doesn't really hold up, and it points out the fact that the whole idea of white people is a pretty recent invention, because we used to 100 years ago, 200 years ago, it's like there was no white people. There was Irish people, Italian people, Spanish people, English people, and that kind of, when you look at this thing in that light, it breaks down, because a lot of what this thing talks about, they're talking about English and German people.
Yeah.
Like Time. Follow rigid time schedules. Okay. That's probably true of German Americans in the 19th century, but their Irish neighbors who lived right beside them were not like that. You know, like there were vast cultural differences amongst quote unquote white people in America.
Well, see that, and that's the thing.
You know?
White culture is not, because, and that's what it goes back to, is not identifying as being, because it's harder. You don't feel the same necessity to identify when you aren't a minority,
right,
because you're not as easily singled out. And I understand that. That's the way it is. If you're the only black dude in a group of white people, you're easily singled out.
Yeah.
But if I go to a quote unquote black church and I'm the only white person there, I'm easily singled out, because I am, while I'm not completely pasty white, I'm on the lighter side.
white, yeah.
So the thing is, when you look at white culture, it goes back to German Americans, Scotch-Irish Americans, Italian Americans. That's the way. I mean, I wasn't raised, we're a white family. No,
right,
we're a Scotch-Irish English family. And that takes us into a completely different culture than, you know, what they're saying white people go into is, because my Scottish people, they don't like Irish people, they don't like English people, vice versa. And none of them like the French.
Yeah.
And the French don't like them. I mean, white culture has been so tribal over the years that's why it's harder for white people to say, well, the people that say, well, we're part of, I'm proud to be white. It's usually because they subscribe to their ideas, the Aryan mindsets and those things.
Well, I like my favorite on this is under aesthetics. Based on European culture, the very next one is bland is best. Okay, European culture. We're talking about French, Italian, English,
right,
German. Have you ever had Italian food?
All the time, yeah.
Is it bland?
No.
Have you ever had, Spanish cuisine?
No.
French?
Probably not. I'm not that cultured.
This idea
in that area.
White culture loves bland stuff. I'm like, well, okay, you're talking about maybe British people.
That's racist, because they're actually calling us vanilla.
But you're clearly not talking about Italian people or Spanish people or French people.
Yeah.
Well,
and so that even goes back to the minority mindset of like, we're different than the norm, so the norm's bland.
Right.
Even though the norm is just, America is just this big mix of everything.
Yeah, that's what's so cool about it.
Yeah, it makes it great. It's like, you can have Italian for supper and have, whatever for breakfast. When we don't realize, because we're white, that we're just having bland white food all the time.
Yeah. And just as a final thing, this is the part of it that really kind of bothers me and is worrying on a deeper level politically. Because these are the things that we used to all accept as non-negotiable as Americans, okay? These are under the heading of justice, based on English common law. Okay, I do not want to live in a country with a court system that is not based on English common law. I do not want to live in a country where we don't have trial rights, where we don't have trial by jury, where we don't have due process. That's all based on English common law. That's where it all comes from. We should all value that and want that. That has given us literally everything we have. The bullet point under that is protect property. Yeah, property rights are literally the foundation of all the prosperity, all the freedom, everything we have. Does somebody want to do away with property rights? Is that what this is suggesting? That property rights are like a subjective thing? Like maybe we can have property rights, or maybe that's just a white people's bias?
Well, and it goes back to how left-leaning mindsets have kept African-American communities enslaved.
Right.
Is because if you don't ever have anything of true value, if you don't ever have anything if you don't ever have property, if you don't ever have possessions, things that are, would deem you as value, being looked at as prestigious.
Right.
What this group is not realizing is that you've always got each group, if you break it down where we all come from, where white people come from, whatever country it was you originated in, you've always had rich and poor.
Yeah.
It's always been that way. I mean, you go to, I mentioned 9th century England earlier, and
Right.
you've got royalty and you've got peasantry. And you've got group families that have tons of land, and I'm sure that, you've got families that had nothing, and they were always like, man, it'd be nice to have what this group of people had.
Yeah.
And what they're able to do, this group's able to do, and it's they advertise themselves as African American leaders, but it's really a lot of times white liberals that are behind a lot of this, that are saying, well, look at what all these white people have. And they're able to keep African American communities from growing and succeeding,
Right.
because if you can keep them living in crappy housing, if you can keep them in that mindset of, well, you don't have anything and it's because of these people,
Right.
it goes back to this mindset of these guys are the bad guys, then the certain people can stay in power from that.
Yeah.
Even when white people are able to be behind a lot of this and sell out other white people, because
Right.
there's not that identity that African American communities have.
Right.
I value that community that I see in my black friends, people I played football with, people I knew in school. I mean, they're especially their grandparents. A lot of them were raised by their grandparents, unfortunately. But some of my friends that were raised by their grandparents, they knew what lines to cross and what not to cross. And they had more standards.
Yeah.
They were raised in more standards and more of a family mindset than a lot of my white friends.
Yeah.
And so they do have a special culture. But it's not because they're superior. It's because unfortunately, a lot of white people have sold out to that. But it shouldn't be divided by that. There's
Right.
good people and there's bad people.
Yeah.
There's good people that are raising their kids to add things to society, and there's people that are not.
Right.
And all they're doing with that list of stuff is continuing to put their thumb down on black communities. And I'm sorry, but that's the truth of it.
Yeah. Well, people miss the fact that property rights that's the entire engine of economic mobilization.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what in 9th century England people didn't have. That's
yeah.
why you had people locked into peasantry
Right.
for generations.
You couldn't have anything if your name wasn't this name.
That's right.
And so this goes to what I wanted to read. We talked about this earlier. What I wanted to read about that this lady, a German citizen, had said or had wrote, and it answers a lot of this, a lot of these problems, a lot of these issues that we've talked about. And you do go back to England. And I don't, I was always, they were always the bad guys in every story that I've ever heard. But as I began to understand my family history, I go back to a time where my family was knee deep in all of that.
Yep.
And yes, I had family and, Scottish family and Irish family, but the other majority is English.
Yeah.
And so there comes a point in time where, I find in my family history where my family was on the side of success, and they were, some point in time royalty, where most families, especially English, British Isles families find.
Yep.
But then there were times that I know that the family were peasantry, and it was specifically during the uprisings a little later on in that history, and I don't want to go too deeply into this, but where my family was actually subjected to peasantry because one family member chose to stand against the English rule in Scotland. And the family was actually shamed in society because one family member 2 generations ago chose to do something wrong. And that's what we're seeing right now is we're going to victimize white people because white people used to own slaves. Well, if we lay it all out, and I heard this, this is from someone else, but like I mentioned to you, James, I mean, can't everyone be made a bad guy about slavery? Like, are we going to victimize people with, Italian heritage because they used to own slaves so long ago? We could certainly victimize the English and the Irish and the Scottish because slave trades were huge at that, during the Middle Ages.
Yep.
We can victimize Africans, or we could make Africans the bad guy of the story because the Egyptians owned, Jewish slaves.
Yep.
In the book of Exodus. And so I read this last night. I was reading, I've been doing a little bit of studying and reading on the Holocaust and Nazi Germany and how I saw these parallels and what we're seeing today. And this German citizen, she's probably graduated high school, early 2000s. And they were, when she was growing up, was of course during their issues they were having in Germany, but they had learned about the Holocaust, about World War II, and she actually had a chance when she was in high school to visit Auschwitz. And she goes to visit Auschwitz with some Polish friends, Polish Jews, matter of fact. Mm. And she writes here, and she said, "When I saw the things that were taken from the prisoners," she said, "and there's just actually one room that is only filled with hair. The things that they took their humanity, they stripped that humanity from them." She said, "All of the pieces came together in my mind." And so we know that they would shave their hair to dehumanize them. They would take their rings and their jewelry and watches and things. And to think about that, this really struck a chord in her heart about the wrong that was done. It says, "All the pieces came together in my mind, and I realized the first time on an emotional basis the whole horror." And I think that I was not the only one. And so they're at Auschwitz, and they're in a German group of people touring Auschwitz. And they had friends that were Polish, and because of their language barrier, they toured separately. So this group of about 10 Germans are going through the prison together. It says, "I think I was not the only one. I found the toughest guy in our group, who would normally never show feelings, standing in front of a display cabinet with baby shoes, crying. When the tour ended, we didn't know how to look our Polish friends in the eyes again, because I think most of us felt unbelievably guilty, as it was our grandparents who did that to their grandparents, together with many, many other innocent people. I remember us even talking about the fact that we were insecure on how to deal with that. Luckily, our Polish friends were pretty cool. When they saw us again after their tour and saw that we were all shocked and some of us still crying, they came up to us and told us that we shouldn't be ashamed at all and that we are not responsible for the deeds of our ancestors. It took me a few years to get to the point where I could really feel that way, but I eventually got there." And I think that's beautiful because if we're going to come down to the brass tacks, because and I always do this, if you're going to argue that you've been discriminated against or whatever, I subscribe to the mindset that there's always someone that's went through something tougher than me in my life, and that helps me go on and not live in the victim mindset.
100%.
So if we're going to say, well, because what you see is the way that African slaves were treated, a lot of people want you to think that they were treated worse than anyone else in history. And that's so far from the truth. Yeah. They were treated badly, and it's a shame. But the Jews, I mean,
history is rife with just unbelievable inhumanity.
There's no
torture on the part of slave owners.
Yeah,
in pretty much every culture.
But I mean, if we're going to say that this group is treated worse than anyone, look at the way that the Jews were treated.
Yeah,
12 million killed in the Holocaust. Literally, you go back to the beginning of time, and the Jews have been at the center of hate.
Right.
But these people and these Polish folks were like, "Hey, you don't have to feel bad for what your ancestors did." How rational is that?
I know.
That's very rational.
And look how successful the Jews have become.
Oh, exactly.
Without reparations, without politics, without any.
We know reparations kill and destroy. I mean, on our continent, the Native Americans have been treated worse than any ethnic group, any race group in the world. I mean, treated terribly.
Yeah.
And because of the systems that liberals and some black leaders are advocating for those communities, they're going to end up in the same spot.
Yeah.
Planned Parenthood is killing the African American community. And it's starting at a point where they don't have the chance to even make the decision to succeed.
Yeah.
And the Native American cultures, both sides of my dad's family, you go back one generation, full-blood Native American.
Yeah.
One group, I believe Choctaw, one group Cherokee. Everybody's a little bit Cherokee.
Yeah.
So they say, especially in our area. But, legitimate Indian. That culture is lost to me.
Yeah.
Because, it has been so quickly erased. There's not been it's not from lack of teaching, but it was lost on my grandparents. They weren't raised that way because it has been washed away because of the way that it's been established. They've set up this system by white men to say, well, we'll do this, we'll hand you this, we'll make this for you. And it's destroyed their culture.
Yeah.
And so, therefore, it's not a part of my culture. And that's a shame.
Yeah.
Where will we be in the next 30 years if, will there be an African-American culture? Or will it die out at the hands of liberal progressives?
I don't know. What I do know is that when you blame, you lose.
That's right.
When you blame, you lose. Well, we're at 1:45. Let's do a quick 2A time.
All right.
Let's just follow up with our favorite St. Louis couple.
Yes.
Because these people have been they've been like just a viral hit out there on the internet.
Right.
Because probably just the novelty of like nobody's ever seen like a couple stand out front of their home with a rifle, like
they you could
shouting
tell,
at a mob of people to get out their lawn.
You can tell they've never done that. Yeah. I mean, so there's some clear mishandling done. I mean, the way the woman was holding the gun at the crowd, pointing the gun at the crowd is not, that's not cool. It just made the gun community. It made the gun community look bad. It was like
it's not a good look, and
the
even
way
the guy, he was not, an ideal handling.
No,
of
he
that rifle.
Definitely didn't look like Chuck Norris
in any way, shape, or form.
But it goes back to what we talked about last week. What we mentioned even today is when you back people in a corner.
Yeah,
I mean, they have every right to do it. And so what bothers me is that there was a successful attempt and execution of going and taking their weapons.
Yeah.
And see, that's where me and the law, I support and back the blue until they come to my house and tell me they're taking my guns.
Well, what was so crazy is that, it's a castle doctrine state.
Yeah.
Like you would expect that there would be some kind of legal protection for these people who did not fire a single round, who did not injure a single person. Nothing actually happened. They were on their property in a castle doctrine state, and yet they're being made into like political martyrs. Yeah. Yep. And that frightened me a little bit.
Hey. Well, and that's my thing. Like I'm not advocating violence. It's just, the even down, and I know that it's the officer's job to go do that, but that's not right. And that's to the point where we're allowing them to go too far. And is it probably a good idea for them to start fighting the police? It's not the police's fault, but we've got to draw the line somewhere. Yeah. And the Second Amendment is being threatened so greatly. It'll be something that the guns won't be able to get rid of guns. I mean, that's the thing. That's one area that could so easily throw us into civil war is guns, because you can take one gun from every American in the nation and everybody still has a gun. Yeah. I mean, it's like you're not. I mean, we might be out there with Grandpa's 12 gauge fighting, but we'll be out there fighting with something. Yeah. And so, I always go back to how long will these officers enforce that kind of stuff? How long will they realize? Because it won't be too long if they're community people that they'll be called to a family member's house to take a gun. Yeah. And so the mindset of castle doctrine is someone threatens your property, not just you. Right. If you come home and somebody's in your garage and you splatter them all over the wall, I mean, you're protecting your home. Yeah. If you are asleep at night and someone doesn't identify themselves and they're outside of your house and you shoot them, you're in the right. Yeah. If someone's on your property and did you see the destruction that the rioters did? Yeah. I mean, they tore like an industrial gate down. Right. Now, granted, these people lived in like Fidel Castro's compound. I mean, that place looks like it looks like a government safe house in Cuba somewhere. But that's their property. That gate they tore down. What would the mayor of St. Louis do? Didn't they actually? Hold on, just a second. Was it the mayor of St. Louis that actually had the protesters come to their house?
I think the protesters were marching to the mayor's house.
That's what they were doing. So I was about to say, what would the mayor of St. Louis do? But actually, I don't think he or she didn't come out with a gun.
Yeah.
But anyway, like what would these politicians do if people show up to their
Right.
house like that?
Well,
And-
it's crazy that there's this endless enabling of the violence on the part of the protesters by the media and the politicians, where it's like, yeah, these people destroyed that gate.
yeah.
But it's like, oh, well, they didn't mean any harm. They weren't really a threat. I'm like,
Yeah.
that is crazy.
Right.
And it's the same thing you see all over. It's like, well, it's mostly peaceful.
Well, they're very lucky none of them got shot. Like no kid, because you could tell the people they're
Yeah.
not gun professionals, and I'm not saying I'm a gun professional, but
Yeah.
there were initial rules that they did not follow, even in the
Yeah.
way that they were holding and handling the firearms. They're lucky they didn't get shot. I mean, because and here's the thing, I'm not saying I would do any different. Now I have like a different mindset about certain things. I have a different plan about what maybe I would do in a situation. But when you're in the heat of a moment,
And
all plans go out the window.
And it's not like there was one guy out there. There's a mob of however 50 people maybe.
Oh, if it was one guy, we wouldn't
You know?
have even heard about it.
Yeah.
But there's a mob of people.
This is a mob who just destroyed a giant chunk of private property.
Yeah.
And now they're on your front lawn screaming obscenities.
Right. And so that goes back to there should be equal punishment for the crime, but there's also so many variables into it. If you topple a statue over and no one gets hurt, 10 years in prison. That's a hefty crime penalty, but that prevents people. People are like, oh man, maybe we shouldn't do this.
Yeah.
Now, so that's what I'm saying when I say there should be adequate penalties to the crime. Now, in this certain circumstance, when you have a mob of people that could easily overpower you and someone loses their life because they're a part of that, that to me is like, if they started to charge that house and he started blasting people away, he's defending himself.
Yeah.
And so that's why the black and whites of these things shouldn't be where they're at right now, because the Black Lives Matter mural out front of Trump Tower, she went and defaced it. Well, did they get a permit to even put it up to begin with?
They did.
Did they?
They did, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, she's...
You didn't see Bill de Blasio out there?
No, I try not... to be on a political podcast, I try not to follow the news.
Bill de Blasio was out there with his roller and his mask on and getting a nice photo op.
That's just to get votes.
They are fully permitted.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so they have the freedom of speech. They have the freedom to do that. They went the right route.
Yeah.
That was a crime for that woman to go deface it. And so that's rational American thinking.
Right.
But we're
right.
past that point, because if I went out there and wanted to paint Trump 2020 on a road, not White Lives Matter, because that's what they immediately want to go to, is that well, if you wanted to do it, you wanted to put White Lives. No. If I went to go put Trump 2020 mural out somewhere and somebody defaced it, where would the police be?
Oh, yeah.
They would not be there.
No problem.
Right. Especially where we live.
Yeah.
So, point of 2A time today is that this St. Louis couple is a victim. They're victims of a corrupt, messed up situation. This is wrong in all ways.
Right.
It's wrong from the top. It's wrong. I mean, and the officers, that's their job, but I mean, come on. Like, it's not going to be long where you're sending somebody to someone's door to be shot.
Well, I think that's an important thing about this, is that I think people are mistakenly emboldened. Like, the people who are for gun confiscation are mistakenly emboldened that this happened.
Yeah.
Because this is one couple that has the entire nation's focus on them.
Yeah.
That has the national political pressure on them. They were able to go and confiscate that rifle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, but try going out and confiscating millions and millions and millions and millions of people's rifles. It's going to be a totally different situation. Yeah. You're not going to get away with it like that.
And my philosophy is, that's what aggravates me about it, is because there was an officer came to our door last night, and it wasn't to get me or get my guns or anything, and I knew that going into it. I'm like, I'm gonna listen to what this guy has to say. I mean, it's my duty as a citizen to
100%.
To do that. But I mean, I don't know what I would have done if he'd have been like, yeah, I'm here to get your AR-15.
Yeah.
I'd be like, well, you better tell whoever told you to do that to come get it themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I don't want it to go to that point, but like that's what it's a slippery slope, and we go from, well, we're only going to take AR-15, so we're taking everything.
Yeah.
And that's my thing with Beto O'Rourke and his whole spiel that he did about we're coming for your AR-15s. If you want to take them, don't send somebody that's making $20,000 a year to come take it.
Yeah.
You march your little hind end down to my house and see about it, because it's not, what it does is it puts good citizens in the middle of it. And you're putting that's my thing is like you're asking a police officer to infringe on someone's rights.
No, you'll see massive,
and that's so wrong.
You'll see massive noncompliance from local law enforcement if they try to roll out a national gun confiscation, because they're already dropping out just over the way they've been treated with all these protests and things. You know, like they're already to the point now where they're like, screw this job.
I don't blame them.
I don't either.
And see, that's what ends up happening. That's how it dismantles all of our society, is you take away the things protecting it, such as healthcare, police departments, fire departments, and the businesses start to shut down because the businesses can't function. I mean, we're in the financial industry. Think about, you know, not having the police. I mean, I was on the phone with the police 3 times last week just because of crap that happened around our building.
If we suddenly were in a situation where we knew that we would be unable to get police dispatched to where we work, I would have a big problem going into work every day.
That's right.
You know?
We need them.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I think that about does it for this episode of the Liberty Bell. Thanks for listening. We wanted to mention our email address because I always forget to give the email address, which is libertybellpodcast@gmail.com. If you want to reach out to us, give us your questions and comments and feedback, and we appreciate you listening.
Yeah. Check us out there. Also, James is heading up our YouTube division of the Liberty Bell, and he is doing a heck of a job. He's blowing me out of the water. We got more views. We got more views on our YouTube page than I handle kind of the podcast. And it's not like we chose to do this. It's just what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
And so, but please, to help me catch up with James's, it's all for the common goal. But, you know, but I want to catch up with him in podcast downloads, listens. Go and find us on Spotify, find us on Google Podcasts, find us on Stitcher, find us on Apple Podcasts. Find us out there, download us, listen to us on your way to work, watch us on YouTube when you're resting before you go to sleep or whatever it is you're doing. But you can find us on podcast platforms. You can find us on YouTube now.
Yep.
I think YouTube may be the key to our success.
Well, we got a lot of good YouTube videos in the works. We got some gun reviews coming. We've got some tutorials coming. We've got some interviews coming. We got all kind of stuff we're filming for our YouTube channel. So make sure you subscribe, hit that bell, get your notifications, and
ring the bell.
Ring that
bell. Awesome.
All right. Well, thanks for listening to the Liberty Bell. We believe that only the moral strength of men can restore America. We are pro-cop, pro-gun, pro-constitution, pro-freedom, pro-goodness.
We're pro-long podcast.
We are
2 hours, almost 2 hours.
That's right. All right. Thanks for listening.